Hello, everybody. It is Sunday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our Steelers postgame show by Paul Zeise, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. After an inspired Steelers victory in the end, Paul, it wasn't always easy for them, certainly offensively. Obviously, the big headlines are Aaron Rodgers is injured. Jalen Ramsey is disqualified from the game after getting into a couple of scrapes with Ja'Marr Chase. So there's a lot to tackle from this one, Paul. Before we get too far into it, we want to remind you that this show is brought to you by FanDuel. And Paul, I wanted to get your thoughts initially here on what we saw today at Acrisure Stadium.
Well, I mean, clearly they had a better defensive game plan than they did the first time they played the Bengals. I thought the first time they played the Bengals, they were very passive, and they probably did not allow themselves to really go after Joe Flacco. I thought today they went after him. And, even though they didn't get him a ton, they forced, his hand and forced him to throw the ball before he wanted to. Obviously in coverage, I thought they did a much better job of trying to basically make sure that Ja'Marr Chase was always accounted for on every route. And, the bottom line is they did a great job defensively, I thought, just basically stopping what the Bengals like to do. Offensively, I guess the word we would use is efficient, right? They were efficient. They took advantage of some opportunities. I know it'll be a talking point this week with respect to Mason Rudolph, but it looked to me like he got the ball out a little quicker and was able to make some throws that we haven't seen from Aaron Rodgers, but I think that's down the road. I think all in all, the Steelers knew they needed this game, and I thought it was pretty clear by the way that they came out that they were playing with a sense of urgency that maybe they haven't had for a while.
Yes, Paul, a lot to dig into. Before we do, we want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, you mentioned the quarterback situation there at the top. There's been a lot of Mason Rudolph truthers who've wanted their opportunity to see him at the controls of this team for some time. I thought today was an interesting kind of side-by-side because you have one half of Aaron Rodgers, one half of Mason Rudolph. I didn't think either distinguished themselves particularly well. You mentioned the ball seemed to get out a little bit faster with Mason Rudolph, but in the end, he finishes 12 of 16, 127 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, and the touchdown. Aaron Rodgers was 9 of 15 for 116 yards, 7.7 per attempt with a touchdown of his own. Difference in the passer rating was kind of negligible. Mason Rudolph was 118.5. Aaron Rodgers was 106.5. So how do you compare what you saw from the two of them today in a little more detail, Paul?
Well, it felt like the offense moved a little bit quicker and a little bit more with Rudolph getting the ball out quicker. I think a couple of those screen passes, a couple of those shorter passes. He gave his receivers an opportunity to run after the ball, run after the catch. I also think that with Rudolph, you have a threat to throw the ball down the field that probably you don't have with Rodgers. At the end of the day, I would tell you, I thought he was more efficient in what he did than what Rodgers did. I thought the offense looked better with him. I'm not saying that you make a change. I'm not saying that, but I do think that it's something to watch. I just think that that's one of those things where it's something to watch. And, they got, the offense got help today because the defense scored 14 points. But, for the most part, I look at, the way that the game played out and I say, if the offense can do what it did today, they have an opportunity maybe to give themselves a chance to win some game.
Yeah, I guess I was slightly dubious on how much better Rudolph was than Rodgers today because you got a couple nice conversions. One from Darnell Washington on that stumbling play right up to the first down marker. Then Kenneth Gainwell makes some plays happen with his feet for another big conversion when they were, it was like a 3rd and long there. So his guys helped him out, but he put them in a position to succeed. So I do think you have to give him credit for that. But Paul, you mentioned, I think you wrote a column about this last week. What happens if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt? Is there a chance he could get benched? With what you saw from Mason Rudolph today, I'm not going to ask because I don't think they're straight up going to tell Aaron Rodgers he's got to sit based on what he's done. But is there a scenario where Mason Rudolph kind of takes the job the way he did late in the 2023 season, where he just played so well that and Kenny Pickett was injured and wasn't quite himself, that they just rolled with Mason Rudolph there at the end? Is there any chance that could happen? Or if Rodgers is healthy, is he still the guy for this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think if he's healthy, it would take a lot, I think, for them to want to bench him and take him out. And I don't think they're going to do that unless he's so bad for, like 2 games and it's very clear that, he's not 100% and all that other stuff. I can't imagine a scenario where they're going to bench Aaron Rodgers. I haven't heard yet, obviously, because the post game is going on right now. I haven't heard yet what his status is going to be and how bad he's hurt. But to me, if he's a little banged up, you might have to go with Rudolph next week anyway. Even if he's not 100%, but, maybe he could get cleared, but he's not 100%. I don't know. I think you probably sit him for a game and get him healthy for, the down stretch, this stretch down where you've got, a couple of games against the Ravens and all that other stuff coming up.
How does your outlook change if Aaron Rodgers is forced to miss some time or just even significant time for the rest of the season? Do you look at Mason Rudolph and the way he played today and say he can keep this team generally on the tracks such that the quarterback play is not going to necessarily be the determining factor for this team this season? Or is it a big loss, considering that we've seen at times Aaron Rodgers knows where the ball needs to go. Maybe he physically isn't able to do it the way he did early in his career, but I think he reads the defense a little bit better. I think that first couple drives, Mason missed some open plays. So if you do have to stick with Mason Rudolph for an extended length of time, does it change your impression of how this season is going for the team, or do you think he's at least capable of keeping them right about where they are?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, if you would have asked me this question a week or two ago, I'd have said no way. But really, I mean, Rodgers didn't play great last week, and I don't know that he was great in the first half of this game. So if that's what they're going to get from Rodgers the rest of the way, if he's banged up a little bit or whatever, I got to be honest with you. I think with Rudolph, he's good enough that you can survive. Now, is he good enough to beat all the teams they're going to need him to beat? Detroit, Buffalo, the Ravens twice, all that other stuff? I don't know. But I do know that, he is going to be the kind of guy who is going to give you a chance to win games. And you know what? If the defense plays like they did today, you're going to have a chance. So to me, I think that you put him in there, you put him out there, and, I think you have a shot. He'll give you a shot. And if the defense plays well, then you can still win games. So, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We have to see what's really going on with Rodgers. That's the big thing. Yeah,
stay tuned to the Post-Gazette Steelers YouTube channel for updates on Aaron Rodgers' condition. If we get any news after the game, we're heading into Week 12 when they will have a game against the Chicago Bears. Paul, let's talk about this running game a little bit because they went to it early and often today. Ended up being pretty good balance in the end. 31 pass attempts between the two QBs, 28 carries for the running backs. Jaylen Warren got 10 for 62. Kenneth Gainwell 9 for 24. But obviously had some big plays in the passing game, which we'll get to, I'm sure, in a minute. Caleb Johnson was in there. Ended up rushing for 111 yards at an average of 4 per carry as a team. What were your thoughts on the running game today, Paul? At times, I thought they overcommitted to it, or I think you could make the argument that you've made on this show and on your podcast that some of the runs that they did have that didn't work were just quite predictable. It was kind of first down run, second down run, third down pass. How did you view what they did in the running game today?
Well, I mean, Jaylen Warren had 62 yards on 10 carries. It's a pretty good average no matter what you're trying to do. I feel like they don't really use the running game the right way. I feel like they need to do a better job of mixing it up and making sure that you are, taking advantage of other teams' tendencies, thinking that you are going to basically, throw the ball in certain situations. I feel like they don't really know how to unleash it and get it going. It's pretty clear to me that Warren is a better runner than Gainwell, but I don't know by how much, and Gainwell seems to be better after the catch. He seems to be better, he seems to be pretty good when he catches the ball and runs. So I would like to see them actually get better at running the football. That's what I would like to see them get better at.
Paul, what's your level of concern if Jaylen Warren is forced to miss some time? Because obviously we saw him go out and then we saw him come back in for a couple of plays. Then we didn't see him for most of the rest of the game. It was Kenneth Gainwell in the backfield. As I mentioned, Kenneth Gainwell was not terribly efficient today, only 24 yards on the 9 carries. That's 2.7 per attempt. But he made a massive impact in the passing game, 7 catches, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11.6 per catch. Can Kenneth Gainwell do the things that the Steelers would need them to do in the running game? We saw him rush for nearly 100 yards in that win in Dublin when Jaylen Warren was out. So he's demonstrated that he can do that. Today he shows what he can do in the passing game. What's your level of faith in him and Caleb Johnson as a duo if you have Jaylen Warren being limited or completely out the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, we saw a little bit more from Caleb Johnson today, didn't we? I mean, he seemed to be a little bit better today, a little bit less hesitant, but I don't know if he's ready for, any significant role on this team.
He had that one run wiped out by the penalty.
Yeah.
It looked nice, but obviously it was a face mask. So.
Yeah, exactly. And then Kenneth Gainwell, to me, I think is a good complementary running back. I'm not sure if that combo is as good as Warren and Gainwell. I think Warren is much better than Caleb Johnson. So my confidence level is that they can be efficient on some level and they can make sure that they are able to, move the ball a little bit or whatever. But by the same token, I just don't know that they're good enough at that position, honestly. I just don't know that is going to be a good enough combination to give them the running game they're going to need to take the pressure off the pass game.
Paul, Darnell Washington had that violent catch and run toward the end of the first half that set up that field goal. He is the top pass catcher among guys who aren't in the backfield. Yeah. 4 catches, 67 yards, 16.8 per attempt. Paul, explosive stuff. They still seem to keep finding him in the passing game. What is he adding to this offense for you?
Well, I think that obviously if he's going to be the guy that nobody can tackle, then he becomes really a weapon on those 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 7 type plays, doesn't he? You throw it to him at 4 or 5 and he runs over people for 4 or 5 more yards. I don't know. He's kind of one of those guys, Adam, that becomes a folk hero, because of those kind of plays that he made today where he ran guys over and did some things to make, the fans go crazy. I don't know if you want him to be the focal point of your offense, though. And I don't know that, you want him to throw the ball or you want him to catch the ball more than 3 or 4 times in a game. So, but listen, it was fun to watch him. And, he's hard to tackle and he's a big, strong guy and he's getting more confident every week. So they can certainly continue to find a role for him, I'm sure.
Let's talk DK Metcalf, another kind of, second gear kind of day today. 5 catches, 49 yards, 9.8 per catch. Had a couple of penalties, one wiped out, a long catch that would have given him a better day. What's your interpretation of how, there was a lot of talk about him during the week. Could he, bounce back from those rough couple of weeks? I don't know if we fully saw it today, Paul, but he did seem to have a little chemistry there with Mason Rudolph in the second half. It was a little more tortured, I think, in the first half for him. But I think he got a couple balls in a row, seemed to be getting into a little bit of a rhythm before the game just kind of took, him out of it, just with the way the game flow was going and the Steelers having the big lead and stuff late. How do you evaluate what you saw from DK Metcalf?
Well, at least we got to the point now where he has the most targets, or at least the second most targets, right? I think he has 8, which that's what it should be. He had 8, and Gainwell had 8, and Darnell Washington had 5. My point is, at least now they're trying to throw the ball to him, and that's something they need to continue to do. That's why you brought him here. Throw the ball to him. He hasn't really made spectacular plays. I get it. And I think at the end of the day, when you make a $30 million receiver, you want to see some big time plays. You want to see some things that he can do. They did show on the screen the one play where they threw it to Gainwell. If Rudolph would have just looked down the field, it would have been a 60-yard touchdown or something to Metcalf because he was open. But from your $30 million receiver, what do you want to see? You want to see him make a lot of plays. At least if you throw it to him 8 or 9 times a game, you're giving him that opportunity. Still a little underwhelmed by him, to be honest. He had to play down on the sideline where I thought it was a really, really tough offensive pass interference call. I didn't like that call at all. But for the most part, I've been a little underwhelmed by him. He's good. Obviously, he's got talent, all that other good stuff. Big guy, big, strong guy. But, man, he's a $30 million receiver. You got to do more than that, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think we've seen that he maybe doesn't have something Chris Carter brought up on our podcast this week is the combat catch stuff. He's not quite as good at that as George Pickens. He's probably a more well-rounded number one than the Steelers have had in that position for a period of time. But, when he's the only, viable wide receiver in this group seemingly at the moment, it draws a lot of coverage onto him, and it makes his life difficult, certainly more so than it was in Seattle, where he had some talented guys around him for most of his career there. So we'll continue to monitor the situation with him. Paul, the offensive line, I thought, had an interesting day today. Aaron Rodgers obviously took the sack. He took those hits that led to the injury. However, they mentioned at one point in the broadcast that Aaron Rodgers had more time to throw than any game in the last 6 or 7 years for him. So the pass blockers kind of had that going for them. There was some good work in the running game. There was some good blocking in the passing game today, Paul. I thought some of those screens that worked for Kenneth Gainwell were well blocked by the offensive lineman downfield. Mason McCormick, I think, had the huge block on the one long catch toward the end there for Kenneth Gainwell. So what did you see from those guys today? Was this maybe one of their better games of the year?
It was a mixed bag, I think. But yes, they were generally better than they had been. I thought some of those screen throws that they made and some of those, those passes out into the flat they made, they did block really well. Jaylen Warren ran 6.2 yards per carry. I don't think you can really argue with that. Did they get a holding penalty today? I don't think they did. I'm trying to think if they did. They
got a lot of penalties, but I don't think that was one of them.
No, I don't think they got a holding penalty. Which is a good thing. They had very, very pretty clean game, if you ask me. So, off the top of my head, I'd have to think about all the other games before I said this was their best game. But clearly it's a game that they played I thought they played really well.
Paul, we're going to get into the defense on the other side of this break. Before we do, just want to thank a couple of sponsors. Savinas, Kane & Gallucci is Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos law firm standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers. They have over 85 years of experience. They know how to uncover the truth. They have the experience you need and the commitment your family deserves. They've recovered millions for individuals affected by mesothelioma and other cancers due to asbestos exposure. Call them toll-free at 1-877-227-6558 or visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to tell you to check out our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook for the Steelers' updated AFC North odds. Obviously, they get the win today. That should help bounce them a little bit in this game against Baltimore. The Ravens playing the Browns at 425. So we'll keep an eye on that game. We'll maybe have some reactions later on Sunday and heading into Monday to that and how it's shaping the Steelers' chances going into Week 12. Check out our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Paul, let's talk about this defense. Better across the board against this particular team today. I thought it was going to be a great litmus test for the progress of the changes that Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin have made personnel-wise. they only allowed 12 points through the business end of this game. Pretty good. Does that add legitimacy to the improvement we saw against the Colts and the Chargers? You and I have talked a lot, particularly in the Colts game and the Patriots game, of they relied heavily on the turnovers. And, of course, the defense looks good when you're getting 5 and 6 turnovers in a game. Today, they get the 2 defensive touchdowns, and that certainly makes things look good. But I don't think they were too reliant on the turnover either. They were getting consistent stops against a team that had dominated them pretty well in Cincinnati just about a month ago.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the defense, I mean, was very much improved from what they did against the Bengals and the Packers too. I would say that what they were able to do is force Joe Flacco to throw the ball more, quicker than he wanted to, throw it into places he didn't want to. They didn't sack him a bunch, but they hit him a bunch, and they got to him, and they knocked some passes down. I think this defense is much better when they're aggressive. I don't think they should ever play conservative. I don't think they should ever, try and, lay back and that whole, let's bend but not break. This defense with the players they have and the playmakers they have, they need to be aggressive and they need to go after other teams. And they really need to go, and do everything that they can do to disrupt quarterbacks. And I think they did that today, which they didn't do the first time. And you know what? That's a big reason why it's such a difference.
Did it start, Paul, for you with stopping the run with relative consistency? Chase Brown had that 35-yard run that propped up their rushing totals in his day. He had 18 carries, 99 yards, 5.5 per carry. You take that away, Paul, though, and he wasn't doing a whole lot to threaten you, and I think that allowed everyone to play a little bit differently than they did in that first game when Chase Brown just seemed to be consistently slipping away at times for 8-9 yards on those first down runs, putting Joe Flacco and the passing game in some good situations. You didn't see that with consistency today, even though the numbers maybe don't show that as well.
Right. I mean, I think the biggest thing is they were able to have a little bit of success, I think, running the football early, but it seemed like as the game went on, it was a little bit tougher sledding for them. They had a couple of decently long runs, but yeah, I mean, and I think what that showed is if you take away the run game and the threat of the run and make the Bengals one-dimensional, as good as Flacco is, and you know what, I'll say this, and I know there'll be some idiots that will take this to be, I'm trying to take away credit from the Steelers. I'm not. But Joe Flacco looked hurt today. He didn't look 100%. He looked like, and they kept talking about that shoulder injury he had. He was a little bit off too. I mean, that was a part of it. Again, I'm sure that is going to cause some people's head to explode because we're supposed to just sit here and say hooray for the Steelers all day. But no taking anything away from the Steelers. But I thought Joe Flacco looked like he was a little bit banged up too. He was a little bit off. And to me, when the Steelers were able to stop the run the way they did, they made them one-dimensional. I don't think he felt comfortable trying to chuck the ball around 40 times in the game. In fact, there were a couple of times when I thought they just handed it off because they didn't want him to throw it.
Kyle Duggar gets the pick 6, Paul. It has almost been as if a switch flipped between that last Bengals game and when you move Kyle Duggar into this lineup. Obviously, he hasn't had plays like this today, but it seems like the secondary has looked more whole with him in there. How do you evaluate that move by Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, to bring him in to shore up that secondary group? Seems to be one of the better in-season moves they've made in some time. Obviously, there's a long way to go here, but through 3 weeks, it's hard to argue with the results.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's played well. A guy that they plugged and played pretty much, right? And given all the issues they've had with injuries and whatnot, it is absolutely true, to me at least, it's very true, that they needed to make that move. If they didn't make that move, and he hasn't played as well as hasn't played as well as he has, we could be talking about some different things. I think he's played really well for them. I think he's given them a veteran guy back there that really knows what he's doing and played really well and played hard, but more importantly, can make some plays and do some good things. So I like that move. I think it shores up an area they needed shored up for sure.
Paul, let's talk about Jalen Ramsey. I think he's kind of the 1B to that Kyle Duggar conversation of having moved him to safety. That's been, I think that move has paid dividends, but also today gets himself ejected for scrapping with Jamar Chase. Did you see a punch from the camera angles we were shown? Because I've seen it described as a punch. I don't know if I agree with that. It seemed like a shove to the face. Maybe that's a distinction without a difference to some people, but it didn't look like anything he got involved in today looked suspension worthy, Paul.
No, well, he grabbed his face mask, and then I don't know if he punched him with a second hand, but he did hit, touch his helmet with the second hand. I mean, to me, it's just one of those things where that's just absolutely stupid. Absolutely stupid. You cannot do that. And I mean that. You cannot, that situation, and it could have cost them. It really could have. It really could have cost them. To me, it's just one of those things where, I don't know if he punched him or he didn't punch him, but he did enough where referees saw something, and that's a problem.
Does it concern you at all that's part and parcel of what we've seen from him at other points in his career, or has the Steelers defense lacked this intensity, even if it manifested today in a way that was completely undesirable?
I don't call that intensity. I call that stupidity. I just do. I'm sorry. I've heard this. I've seen this on social media. People talking about, at least there's a fight and all this stuff. You've got to be smart. Okay, you can be. Look, listen. The Steelers were out there knocking people around. They were physical. They were hitting. Every time the Bengals touched the ball, or came close to touching the ball, there was a couple of times where I thought they could. Was it Joey Porter Jr. or no? It was Ramsey who came up and hit Chase from behind. After a play, and probably should have gotten flagged. But that's different. That's going after and being physical and all that other stuff. Getting involved in an altercation, get away from him and walk away and don't even come close to that. You cannot get ejected there. It's just stupid. I don't want to hear this thing, and I'm not getting on you, but I don't want to hear this thing about, they showed fight and intensity. Listen, I'm a coach, basketball, whatever, but that's not fight and intensity. That's stupidity, and that's the kind of thing right there. Honestly, if that was one of my players, he'd be benched by me the next game. So I think, to be honest, I don't think he'll be suspended, nor should he probably, but that's just stupidity.
Yeah, certainly in the down and distance situation where you were probably going to force a kick of some kind from the Bengals and that drive. Of course, the Steelers made the plays to finish the game off, but at that point, it was a huge potential problem for the Steelers defense. It was a loud day for James Pierre as well, Paul. He's been playing well for the last few weeks. Last week was his first extended run in this defense. Gets another opportunity today, gets the fumble recovery for the score, but he made a couple of noticeable plays earlier on in the day as well. Is this kind of play sustainable from him at that cornerback spot, and has it been what this defense needed at that spot?
Well, he played really well today. I mean, obviously, if he plays like that every week, then that's going to be a really good thing, isn't it? I mean, if he does that every week, I think he played well. Is it sustainable? We haven't seen it be sustainable in his career, but he's a little older now, a little more mature, a little more experienced. He's getting an opportunity. Maybe he understands it's his last opportunity, and all of a sudden, you know what? We've seen guys flip the switch like this, after sputtering a little bit earlier in their career. So, if you're asking me, do I expect him to play like he did today every week? No, but it wouldn't shock me if he plays at a level where they can rely on him and he's a good player for them.
Paul, the officials had a heavier hand in this one than they seem to in most games. A lot of roughing the passer calls. There was the controversial one on TJ Watt that Gene Steratore of CBS disagreed with on the broadcast. Steelers got a couple of penalties from the Bengals on that final drive of them getting after Aaron Rodgers a little bit. There were some questionable spots at times. What did you think of what you saw from the officials today?
I hated the offensive pass interference on Chase on that catch. I thought the roughing the passer on TJ Watt was legitimate. I thought the one where the guy went low on Aaron Rodgers was legitimate. The second one was ridiculously – that was a horrible call. I feel like – and I'll tell you a big play we didn't even talk about, but I think it really probably changed a lot of the game. That fourth down tush push that from where I sat and where I looked and every camera angle I saw, I don't think Connor Heyward made it. And if he doesn't, if they call it on the field, he didn't make it, they're not going to overturn it. The Bengals get the ball on about the 39-yard line. That, and that probably changes things a little bit. So to me, I mean, the referees, did they play a part in this game? I don't know. I mean, the field goal drive the Steelers had at the end of the half obviously was propped up by about 40 yards in penalties. But, only one of them was really a bad penalty. Of course, it was a 15-yarder. So I didn't like the way the game was officiated in some ways. I thought, again, that the pass interference, offensive pass interference on Metcalf was ridiculously bad. And I honestly don't think Heyward made the first down, but that's neither here nor there.
What do you think of that play as the Steelers are running it, Paul? I don't quite have the same level of confidence in the Steelers and the way they're doing it with Connor Heyward that I do when I watch the Eagles run it. I also question, don't you want an 11th guy out there if you're just going to broadcast it, you're going to run that play anyway by having Aaron Rodgers stand there with his hands on his hips doing the little motion thing. Don't you want to have an 11th guy in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I guess they just don't want Aaron Rodgers to get hurt. You know what I mean?
Fine, but can't you substitute? Have a wildcat, running back type of situation where obviously the snap's going to Connor Heyward. Get another pusher in there. Get someone who's going to be engaged in the play in some way.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. And actually, if you're going to do that, why not put Washington in the backfield, right? Just put Darnell Washington as the fullback as the first pusher in the backfield, and then you have an opportunity maybe. I don't know. I don't love the play. I don't, but I guess it worked. It probably shouldn't have worked, but it did. But you're right. The only team that really seems to run that the right way is the Eagles.
To what degree was the wind a mitigating factor for the quarterbacks today, Paul? You and I talked about Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph at the top of the show. For people who are just turning in, what were your thoughts on the wind and the impact it did or didn't have? It didn't. I mean, I'm sitting in my house. I'm looking outside. I didn't think it was too crazy, and I get pretty crazy wind where I live. I've definitely seen worse, but they were talking about it incessantly on the broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, the wind actually was really, really cool. Like, I was walking around outside the stadium before the game. It was, it was cold and the wind was howling. And I thought, boy, that's going to play a factor in this game. I think the wind was a little bit of a factor, but I'm going to tell you, I honestly think that Joe Flacco was a little banged up. I do. I know that that's not going to be a popular opinion, but I think, that AC joint thing, the sprain or whatever he has, I mean, they have no option because Jake Browning's terrible. But to me, I mean, he just didn't look the same. He didn't throw the ball crisp. He didn't really throw the ball down the field much at all. And he had some time to do it. The wind might have been a factor a little bit, but I also think that, that combination, the way the Steelers play defense and the fact that Flacco didn't really appear to be 100%, all three of those things played a factor.
Paul, what's your big picture with this team after this victory? You and I talked earlier in the week. Was there anything the Steelers could do against this Bengals team that would make you reevaluate how you view them? I think we both kind of said no. I will say that, yes, there is the Joe Flacco potential injury situation, but I have to give them credit for a big improvement against the same team in a short period of time. Yes, you're playing at home, but they managed to take Jamar Chase mostly out of this game after he drew tons of targets, tons of catches in that game in Cincinnati. So I think it reframes my expectations a little bit in terms of I think they're starting to figure things out with this defense. Have they figured them out enough? Is this going to be a dominant defense as we were promised in the preseason? Probably not, but is it going to be something closer to league average than what we saw in the first half of the season? I'm starting to get faith that there will be, and to me that was probably the one big picture takeaway that you can kind of have, given what happened on offense with the different quarterbacks being in there and the uncertainty.
Yeah, no, I think the defense is playing better. I mean, it definitely is, and it's playing at a much better level, than it was early in the season. I think next week will be an interesting game, Adam. Like I said, I expected them to win this game. We talked all week about it. I expected them the second time around to be better against the Bengals. I expected them to change what they did on defense a little bit and be more aggressive on Flacco. I expected all that, and I said they're going to be able to score against the Bengals defense because the Bengals defense is awful. And I just want to see them play the Bears now, because the Bears game is probably going to be a little bit more difficult than we thought it was going to be, and I think the Bears are playing better, and on the road, out there, it could be a really difficult game for the Steelers.
We'll stay tuned for all that. Paul, before we sign off here, got a lot of new viewers on since the top of the show when we talked about this. Your view of Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers today and what we can take away from that situation moving forward.
Well, like I said, I think moving forward, if Aaron Rodgers isn't 100%, if he's banged up a little bit, you got to go with Mason Rudolph at least, and maybe do what they did with Ben a few times where Ben started the game as the backup and see how it goes. To me, if you can give Aaron Rodgers, an extra week or so to get healthy, to have all these injuries sort of heal up or, whatever it is that's ailing him, why not? But the big thing is they're not going to bench him for Mason Rudolph. So, I know that's going to be a talking point among some people this week. It's not going to happen. So there's no reason to say that, and there's no reason to talk about it. But I do think Mason Rudolph showed a little bit today that if he has to be the guy for a few weeks, you know what? He can move the offense and give him a chance to win some games, especially with the defense playing the way they're playing.
Yeah, now you're starting to get into the grind of this schedule, Paul. You had that early bye after the Minnesota game in Dublin. Then you had the 4 games in 2 days with the Thursday night game with the Bengals the last time around. And then you kind of had those long layoffs. Now they're going to be in an every week type of situation all the way down the stretch. There aren't going to be any long or short weeks like that. So other than I think they got one Monday night left on this schedule, but that's kind of incidental to the conversation we're having. So it does seem if you can give him rest, get him healthy in that kind of portion of your schedule, that's a conversation worth having. But I agree with you, Paul. He'd really have to stink for a period of time before you would consider benching Aaron Rodgers, considering what we saw from him early in the season. So we will continue to monitor all of that. Thank you, Paul, for joining me this week. If you're just joining us for the first time, please consider subscribing to our PG Steelers YouTube channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And check out all of our written work over at post-gazette.com. Lots more coming your way on audio, video, and on the website from our Steelers insiders on the scene, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, Jerry Dulac, and Brian Bacco. We'll also have reaction from the Steelers locker room on the channel later. So, again, make sure you subscribe for all that, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.